what are the key challenges to improving education?
So in this country, we've suffered from a lack of clear, consistent career and college expectations and assessments for students. We've suffered from an unevenness of teaching quality and from an inability to have systems that just work toward continuous improvement. Our teachers have felt very, in many cases, isolated as a profession without the feedback and the support system that they need to be successful. And all of those things have given us a really fragmented environment in which to try to do innovation, and has in fact often stifled innovation because there's limited clear consensus about what makes for effective teacher. Even if I ask everybody in this room, I'd get a variation. We know it when we see it, but we don't always know how to quantify that and then really work and improve on it.
So it sounds like teaching, the quality of teaching is it fair to say that that's the single most important lever that you have to improve education?
Yeah, the data and research is really clear. The number one in-school factor in student performance is a great teacher.
And how do you, so you just alluded to this, but how do you tell if a teacher is a great teacher? What are the attributes? And there has been a lot of research over the last number of decades on this question, I think.
Yeah, in fact, we've done some recent research to say, how do you measure effective teaching and what makes teaching its most powerful? Interestingly enough, you know these things because you probably experienced them. One is whether kids get clear, high, challenging work in classrooms, whether they're engaged deeply in their own learning and in conversations about that work and they get feedback on it, whether the classroom is in a frame where the teacher and the kids respect what happens in that classroom. So is it sort of what we might think of as under control and real learning can happen there? And the other piece is, does my teacher and those adults that I interact with really care about me personally? Do they care about my interest and my passions? And as we looked at ways to measure and think about teaching, teachers come into this work as a calling and they think of it as an art and science. So in the research we did, we wanted to make sure we honored that. So if you think about student learning as one way and whether students are achieving as one important way, you look at teacher effectiveness. But you also think about observations of student practice, and turns out that the perceptions of students are really powerful predictors. So you can add those things up into a pretty fair, respectful image of what's happening in a classroom, and then most importantly, use that to give teachers better feedback and to connect them to the kinds of resources and supports that really do help them improve and help them be less isolated.
So that's an interesting point you just made, which is that students actually can tell whether a teacher is a good teacher or not, generally. Did I get that?
They can. It was one of the most surprising things in the research, and when I looked back at it, I don't know why. Kids see teachers normally 180 days a year. They know it when they see it, and turns out they can be very objective about it. And on objective questions, not questions like, do I like my teacher? But questions like, am I provided with challenging work? Do I get feedback on what I need to do better? Do I get opportunities to engage in rigorous conversations with my peer group? Those things, kids are very perceptive about whether they believe a teacher then is effective. And then it turns out when you look at that against performance of achievement in the classroom and good observations of teachers, they pretty much end up in a really good picture.
And is that being done? Are there surveys of students that are used for teacher in school evaluation?
There are places across the country that are using those surveys routinely. And there are teachers starting to give them individually in their classroom in order to get feedback from their own students.